Okay, welcome to the Indonesia Project's COVID-19 webinar series. My name is Arianto Patunru, and I'm hosting this event with Nur Kamala Mulyani and Bhaskara Adiwena. We acknowledge and celebrate the first Australians and pay our respect to the elders, past and present. We are grateful for the support from the Australian National University and the Australian Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade. Today, we have a special session in collaboration with Prospera, that is Australia-Indonesia Partnership for Economic Development. We're going to discuss how women's career progress in Indonesian public service. Our speakers are Ms. Roksana and Ms. Hanifah from Prospera. And I also welcome Dr. David Nellor, Prospera Facility Director. Roksana is the lead advisor for public sector at Prospera, and Hana is a research analyst in the public sector reform team at Prospera. They will talk about the glass ceiling barriers hindering many women to progress in civil service sector in Indonesia. They will offer some solutions, and they will examine the relevance of the COVID-19 pandemic that has disproportionately cost women's jobs. Before I give the floor to Roksana and Hana, I would like to invite Prospera Facility Director, my good friend Dr. David Nellor, to say a few words. David, over to you.
Thanks, Bajo. Yeah, I was invited just to say a few words, so let me try and limit myself to that. I think, in Indonesia now we're at a very important time. Irrespective of whether the vaccine comes along, and we don't really know the timeline, Indonesia will continue to have macro challenges. But importantly, it's now around the period of this episode when critical decisions are going to be made, which will impact Indonesia's potential growth into the years ahead. So there's both an immediate challenge, plus also an important medium-term challenge. And part of the issues around potential growth and the outcome of that do concern issues around loss of organizational knowledge, how businesses respond to the changing demands for their capital, and whether there's flexibility to move into new areas, because if not, the structural unemployment and mismatches between demand for jobs and the supply of jobs will be problematic. And inevitably, as we know, that in areas such as restaurants, hotels, and so forth, that it's low-skilled workers that are going to suffer. And of course, in that group, women are disproportionately represented. So increasingly important in the months ahead will be to enable business to survive, but also stretched balance sheets to be restructured in a timely way, because all of these factors will shape what Indonesia's potential growth in the years ahead. We know from the Asian crisis time how long it took to return to the pre-crisis path, and we need to try and avoid that on this occasion. The passage of the Omnibus Law, of course, is a welcome development and is helpful for sure, but more will still be needed. So, as I've indicated, women have been disproportionately affected by the crisis, and there's a risk that that will persist if these adjustments can't be made in a timely way. And earlier this year, our colleagues, Melissa Wells and Bimbika Sijupati Basnet, presented to ANU on these issues of the impact of COVID on gender. And today, we're looking to somewhat related issues, but in some sense, there's good news I think we're going to hear. Yes, it's true that women's labor force participation in Indonesia is low, as was discussed in that earlier seminar, but in the civil service, which we're going to talk about today, in the public service, it's 50-50 in terms of gender balance, as the precise numbers Roksana and Hana can show you. So there's a starting point. The issue is how to build on that starting point to strengthen diversity in the public service, because we know from a lot of analysis that diversity produces better outcomes. and that also is part of the potential growth story for Indonesia. So let me stop there and pass over to Roksana.
Thanks, David.
Thank you, David. That's really great. I might get Hana to share the presentation. And thank you so much. First of all, I'd like to also say thank you to the participating Government of Indonesia agency, who are largely Prospera partners, and they will we will tell you who they were for this review of women's career progression in the public sector. And also to the Australian government agencies who are partners of some of those agencies that we worked with for this review. And so thank you to both, and of course to our executive team, Melissa, David, Ibu Della, who have also been supportive in us for this study. I guess the other thing to say is that you know, this study was done completely during COVID, so we had a bit of you know, issues which we tried to manage, but thanks to the Indonesian government partners who really supported us, and we were able to complete it as planned and as designed. And of course, we also worked very closely with the HR teams of each of these agencies. So thank you to them. All right, second slide, Hana. So Hana and I will share, we will cover the background and scope, the data collection method, and the design. And so we had both quantitative and qualitative collection, which we will share the insights from, and then some recommendations, which are a synthesis of what the public servants that we talked to told us about, as well as we did quite a lot of review into various studies of gender and public sector in various countries, including Australia. And so the recommendations are both suggestions from our participants, but also from best practices around the world in public sector. And I think the second slide I'll just skip over because David has actually covered a number of the points. You know, Indonesia ranks 15th in the G20 when we look at gender average of 18% in G20 countries. So Indonesia is 15th. The G20 average is 28%. And Indonesia is doing, as David said, you know, not bad. Malaysia is 32%, Thailand 24%. So, but there is room for improvement. We already covered the labor force participation is consistently low for women in Indonesia. Again, comparing with Thailand and Vietnam, who are doing a bit better. David said, my colleague Bimbika already presented the impact of women in the overall economy as a result of private sector, and as a result of COVID in the private sector, and because women work mainly in the hospitality, health, trade and manufacturing sectors, and are often working with informal arrangements, and therefore are more likely to lose their employment without, you know, much protection. So that's a really huge issue. 1 in 3 women in all of 71 million households in Indonesia are affected by the mass school closure, which also has a significant impact on women because they're struggling with working from home as well as looking after children. Next. So why the focus on public sector? Although the study was designed pre-COVID, it actually has become a pretty interesting story for COVID. As David said, it's a good baseline. Indonesia has 4.1 million civil servants, 52% are women and 48% are male, so it's a really good base. The education level between men and women are also really good. 71% of bachelor's degree holders and 54% of postgraduate degree holders in the civil service are women. A sizable number of the civil servants will retire in the next 5 years. And this is some study that the World Bank did in 2018, which shows that the ratio to male to female retirees in the next 5 years is projected to be 2 to 1. So it provides a really good opportunity for the Indonesian public service to consider who is the next promotions and who are the next group to fill the vacancies that will be coming up in the next 5 years in the public sector. Second. I guess what the analysis we did with the data available from the personnel management area of the public sector, which is BKN, is that the story differs significantly when we actually look at the structural positions of 1 to 4, which is the main sort of levels of the Indonesian public service. There we see a different story from the almost 50 to 48. In the echelon 4, 38% are represented by women, and echelon 3, 24, echelon 2, 13%, and echelon 1, 18%. So in a way, the glass ceiling sort of starts at this structural level. So at the starting level, we've got a really good balance, but when we look at the structural promotions, we are seeing a different pattern develop. And I guess the public service is important because, you know, it does provide decent jobs for women, security of employment, equity of income. So if we can actually look at this sector leading in this area, then it will demonstrate, as it has in some of the other countries' public service, to kind of lead the way and show the way for more diverse workforce for women, and you know, then the public sector sort of private sector also catches up because the public sector is doing things you know, differently, and sort of looking at different processes. So it's a kind of, you know, interesting story there in terms of what could happen in the broader sector for women. Next slide. So as we said, we looked at various other studies, a number of studies which looked at women's career progression in the civil service in Canada, in Philippines, in Australia, and so on. Did a similar thing of, you know, a quantitative and qualitative kind of look at the sort of the barriers. And what we did is we looked at reviewed many of this literature and basically looked at a framework that sort of helps us to both understand the barriers, but also look at the solutions in a practical way, so that we can kind of look at solutions that recognizes the current system, recognizes the leadership potential, and recognizes some of the issues that the participants face that could be supported. So in terms of the echelon 1 and 4, what we did is we really looked at the 3 and 4 levels, because this is the group that's looking to get promoted, looking to be in the senior levels of the Indonesian public service. So the focus was really looking at echelon 3 and 4. Echelon 1 and 2 we used as the leadership cohort. So, you know, where we asked the leadership about what they thought the problems, and we kind of looked at whether the problems resonated with the leadership group. But more importantly, the solutions that were proposed, what does the leadership group have to say? Because they do have a lot of flexibility in addressing some of those problems internally. And so that was, you know, our kind of look at the problems, the solutions, but then test it with the leadership group in terms of how the implementation might be worked out in the future. Next slide. So I talked about the participated agency, just a quick look at them. They're a mix of 11 organizations, ministries. Of course, the Ministry of Finance, as many of you know, is a very big agency and an important partner of Prospera and DFAT and Australia. So we looked at several units within the Ministry of Finance, but we also looked at planning ministry, the civil service ministries, so the administration and bureaucratic reform, the other 3 agencies of the public sector as well, who are actually partners of the Australian Public Service Commission, the partner of Australian National Audit Office, BPK, the partner of the Commonwealth Ombudsman, the Ombudsman Republik Indonesia, and also the Australian Bureau of Statistics, which is BPS. So we had a selection of what you could call statutory bodies in the Australian sort of lingo, and also ministerial and planning sort of coordinating Ministry of Economic Affairs, the coordinating ministries. As you know, Indonesia has ministries at 3 levels, and in this case, we have all 3 levels represented. So ministries at the level 1, ministry at the level 2, and a ministry at level 3. Next. So in terms of the design of this, the data collection process was, we used a kind of quite an iterative process. The reason being, we are on an exploration of the issues and the reasons behind the career progression issue. So we know that the data told us some facts, and the facts were, as we presented in the earlier slide, that echelon 4, as you climb up to echelon 1, we're not seeing women come through the system. But what is the reason for this? That's what we wanted to explore. And so we first did a quantitative survey, and we took all the echelon 3 and 4 at the in the agencies, 11 agencies, 15 agencies, and 11 ministries and agencies, and basically sampled about half of them through a e-survey. The main objective was to really understand what some of these barriers are that participants themselves identify. And we got a reasonably good response rate. We were surprised. We were benchmarking for a 50% response. We got 64%. And of course, we tailored more females, as you saw in the numbers. Women, the focus of the study is on women's career progression. But we, of course, also included some men to have that balance of understanding what the male colleagues also think. We then moved into the qualitative phase. So the quantitative survey gave us some top-level kind of barriers and ideas about solutions. And then we kind of talked to people through focus groups and understood more what those barriers are and where are the pain points, if you like. So we talked to 106 echelon 3, 60 women, echelon 3 and 4, 60 women and 46 men. And it provided a really deep understanding of where some of these barriers are in relation to our framework of the structural and institutional, leadership, and outside of work. And we then tested this, as I said earlier, with the leadership cohort. So we talked to 13 echelon 1 and 2 in those agencies. And then we sort of constructed a number of recommendations and policy proposals, which of course we will be working through with our partners over the next, I'm sure more than a year it will take to work through them. So that's kind of the where the design of where this investigation took us. Next slide, I think I'll hand over to Hana to provide you with some of the quantitative insights from the e-survey. Hana.
Thank you, Roksana, and thank you, ANU, for this opportunity to share our work. And I'm going to continue by sharing some of the key insights we got from the quantitative e-survey data. So as mentioned by Roksana, we did the e-survey so that we can have some ideas into the demographic profile of the aspiring cohort in echelon 3 and 4, and also some indication of what do these people think about, what could be the barriers and what could be the solution, so then we can explore that further in the qualitative data collection phases. So as you can see in the slide, snapshot of the demographic profile in echelon 3 and 4 level tells us that Again, it confirms that women are not well represented in these levels. So only 32% of these levels are women. And not only that there's a low representation of women in this level, there's also a low representation of younger talents in the age group of 26 to 35 years old, or the millennials talents in this level, so only 16% in this level. So in fact, as you can see from the graph, the average age at these levels is already 43 to 44 years old. So there's not much diversity, we can say, at these levels. Interestingly, also, when we look at the age group representation and breaking it down by gender, we see that there's slightly more percentage of women in the younger age category. So in the 26 and 35 years old age group, there's slightly more women. And also the data tell us that almost 40% of the women in these levels are actually in the age group of 26 to 40 years old, which is also, as you know, in the Indonesian society, is the age when women are usually expected to get married and have their own family and have children. So they probably have child-rearing responsibilities. And indeed, when we look at the data on the care responsibility profile, I guess it is not surprising to see that almost all of women and men at this level have children, reported that they have children. But interestingly, when we ask them, who is the primary carer for your children, we began to see some differences between women and men. So 74% of men said that their spouse or their wife is the primary carer for their children, while only 2% of women said the same thing, that their spouse is the primary carer for the children. On the other hand, we see that women, almost half of them said that they themselves are the primary carer for their children, and about a third of them said that they have a nanny or domestic worker to care for their children. So these data tell us a little bit about the sort of common gender role expectation at these levels, and also what kind of gender role that these people at this level assume between women and men. So we can see that even though women are working as well, they also are the primary carer for the children. And that gives us a little bit indication into what could be the glass ceiling barriers, which I'm going to explain further in the qualitative insights. And another key insights from the e-survey is also about the career progression pattern of women and men. So for this, we look at the data on the average time of, how long does it take on average for them to reach the current level of echelon 3 and 4, and also how long they have stayed or stagnated in this level. So interestingly here, we see that women have actually stagnated longer in echelon 3 and 4 compared to men, even though they have shorter average time to reach this level, indicating that there's another glass ceiling within this level. So from echelon 4 to 3, and then from 3 upwards for women. And this data also tells us a little bit about why there's a low representation of younger age talents at these levels. Because as you can see, the average time to reach echelon 4 is 11 years, while it will take another 6 to 7 years to reach echelon 3. So say if someone started their career in the civil service in their 20s, then they have to wait for 11 years before they can actually get into the structural level of echelon 4. And that is sort of the common reality in the civil service right now. But despite of that, I think it's pretty good news, and it's a positive thing to see that most of the men and almost half of the women still aspire to be in the higher echelon level in the next 5 years. So they do want to progress their career, and they do have that aspiration to be in the higher leadership level. And of course, the key insight from the e-survey will be what could be the glass ceiling barriers and what could be the solution. So we asked that with the participant, but we also asked whether they have experienced or been affected by some of the listed barriers. And surprisingly, also for us, more than half of the women, 61% of them, said that they have experienced or been affected by the listed barriers. So these problems are actually real for them in practice, they felt. And the top 3 barriers that was reported in the e-survey, number 1 is family circumstances. So this is related to childcare and domestic work responsibilities. And number 2 is the individual factors. So this is related to the motivation, confidence, and the personal factors of the individuals, also about their competence. And number 3 barriers is work culture. So this is about the working system in their workplace. So, you know, rigid regulations of working hours and also long working hours in the civil service. And on barriers, when we look at the data and breaking it down by gender, we also see some differences between women and men. So for example, more percentage of women actually said that civil service regulation is part of the main barriers for women's career progression. So a third of them said that it is a barrier as opposed to just 16% of the men. And another thing is that almost a third of the women also said that leadership culture in the civil service also is part of the main barrier for women's career progression. Now on to the solution. This is also probably related to their answer to the barriers and also related to their demographic profile. Many of them said that new ways of working, so flexible working arrangement, is the is the most popular solution that the respondents pick. And interestingly, we did the survey before the pandemic and before the working from home is the new normal. So, you know, this data indicates that actually flexible working arrangement in the civil service is something that is aspired by the aspiring cohort by the echelon Gen 4 levels, even before that was the quote unquote new normal. And the second most popular solution is talent management. So this is about, you know, the system to manage talents and to build their competence, capacity building, so training, mentoring, and etc. And the third solution is about better childcare support. So this is about related to employer-supported daycare facilities and also parental leave for parents in the civil service. So again, we see some differences between women and men in their preferences to the solutions. And because, you know, as I said before, that more women actually pick civil service regulation as one of the main barriers. So more of them also said that the civil service regulation should be improved to have so that the civil service has a better career system for everyone. So why some of these people said that these are the main barriers and these are the main solution, and this is what we explore to the qualitative data collection process in the FGDs and personal interviews, because you can't really know what do these people think and what they feel and experience in practice without talking to them, of course. So we had these processes and talking to them through Zoom, because we started this process during the pandemic when we are all working from home in Jakarta. So we organized and we analyzed the insight from the qualitative data from based on the conceptual framework that we have. So we focus mainly in terms of 3 factors. So first is the structural institutionals, which focuses on, you know, the civil service system, the regulation, and the institutional of the civil service. And the second factor is leadership ecosystem, which I'm going to talk more a bit later. And also the third one is outside of work, which is related to sociocultural norms and gender expectation. So on the first factor, structural institutional, the main problem that we got from the participants is that the current regulations, although they feel that the merit system has been, you know, pretty good in ensuring there's equal opportunity, but it has not resulted in equitable outcome for women and men in practice. So the Indonesian civil service has adopted the merit system, but it's still relatively new. It was implemented through law number 5 on civil service in 2014. And almost all participants agree that this is a good sort of foundational regulation to ensure that everyone in the civil service for the recruitment and for the promotion process will be evaluated fairly based on their qualification, achievement, and competence. But they also felt that although the system is already good, the regulation in principle is already good, it has not delivered equitable outcome for women and men, because they also shared that actually many women drop out of the talent pool for succession to the leadership levels because they felt some of the things are not favorable for them. So one leader in particular tell us that actually there's an inconsistency between the merit system principle and the gender mainstreaming principle. Why? Because the merit system actually mandates the civil service to give the same treatment to everyone, regardless of their gender or identity. But actually, of course, in real life practice, everyone has different roles, different responsibilities, and different needs and condition because of their condition. So of course, women and men also have different gender roles because of their gender, right? So it's really not, so the same treatment does not necessarily produce equitable outcome for those with different roles, condition, and responsibilities. And this is something that was shared by the participants in the qualitative data process. So what are in practice, what are these things that are considered to be glass ceiling barriers for women's career progression? Is number one is the talent management system. So previously there was no standardized sort of talent management system in the civil service, and it is also something new that the government has just implemented in early 2020. So they're actually pretty hopeful that with this new talent management, there will be some inclusivity, and will be more gender sensitive in also approaching and evaluating the talents. So not really only look at into education qualification, with which maybe women could be at a disadvantage because they probably delay their study because of the child-rearing responsibility. So, the system should look at into different things of the person as well. And the second common concern that is considered as a glass ceiling barriers for women is also the rotation or transfer policy, or in Indonesia, it's called rotasi mutasi. So I guess it is also common for civil service in many countries. In Indonesia as well, promotion opportunity is often tied with an offer to transfer or to rotasi to another region, because of course Indonesia is also a big country and somebody has to sit in these offices, in the regional offices. And so often promotion is linked to that transfer opportunity. And the problem with the current system is that it's pretty rigid, and transfer is not an option, but it is more of a mandate and an instruction. So the candidates who are told to be promoted and to be transferred cannot refuse the offer. If they refuse, they will have some penalty. So there's really not much of choices, and also there's not much open conversation where the talents can negotiate the terms of the transfer, and also there's not much also preparation and supporting facility for the talents, which is more burdening for women, because according to the FGD participants that we interview, of course women felt badly about leaving their family and being away from their family, not being able to take care of the family for a long time. Or another option is to bring their family, but it will be more costly for them, which is also burdening for them because they don't have the supporting facility from the office. So this is why this is one of the problem that the participants shared with us as the glass ceiling barriers. And the third sort of common concern is around leave policy. So in Indonesia,
I think Hana, you're cutting off.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Do you want me to take the next slide?
Okay.
Try again. See if it works.
Okay. Thank you. I hope this will work now. So the third common concern is around leave policy and flexible work arrangement. So Indonesian civil service has a rigid regulations around working hours and around, attending work. So their performance and their evaluation is tied to this rigid condition that they have to be in the office from 8 to 5. And if they're late, there will be some penalty. And if they are not in the office, there also have to be some information, or there will be some penalty. So of course, this is a bit also a problem for women who have childcare responsibilities, because then, they have to juggle this with also, getting their children to school or getting them back from the school, or if their children is sick, then they have to take leave or maybe absent from work. And this is something that is evaluated, considered to be a low performance from the supervisor and from the organization, because their performance is really tied to this rigid working system. So they feel like if there's a good more flexible leave policy and also, flexible work arrangement with good regulation and standard, they will be supported by this to actually, also care for the children and also maintain their productivity at work. And the second sort of big factors that we look at is also the leadership ecosystem. So what does this mean? This is about leadership style from the leaders and also the work culture that is expected and built by the leaders to their team, the leaders or the supervisors. And the main problem here is the masculine workplace and also masculine leadership style. And this is something that come up from the FGD participants itself. So they feel that there's a masculine bias in leadership style, and also the problem with unconscious bias in looking at, how, women are often absent from work because they have to take care of children. So their performance is, evaluated as less committed compared to the men. And also the leaders are perceived to be, less committed to actually deliver their commitment to ensure there's gender equality in the organization or in the agency. So some of the symptoms in practice, what this is about, is, for example, the expectation of long working hours or to work late and to always be present at work, which is already, as I mentioned, is a bit hard for women unless they're single or if they have other support. And also, lack of flexibility to, for example, complete tasks from other places. And, even some participants reported that the supervisor actually said that they expect their staff, to be always ready on call 24/7, which is of course a bit hard if you have children's or childcare responsibility to sort of manage that and to always be available for the bosses. So of course this is more something, this is a work culture that is, more suitable for someone who have no children, who have no childcare, or who are supported by someone else to take care of those responsibilities, which are most often men. So that's why, many women think this is a glass ceiling barriers for their career progression. And also because, as I mentioned, this FGD was done in the COVID-19 pandemic situation, and working from home was just started in a few weeks, I think, at that time. So we also asked them about their reflection into the experience of working from home. And although they actually have some positive feedback about, how flexible work can actually be done better, which I think Roksana will explain in the solution or recommendation part. Some women also felt like this working from home arrangement is also a bit hard for them, because then they have to juggle work with also school from home arrangement and also, other domestic work responsibilities. And unfortunately, also the expectation of work from the leaders, from the supervisor, is unchanged. So really there's a problem with, the work culture and also leadership expectation around, productivity and work, that their staff have to be always available for them, even though in late midnight. And of course, this is probably too much for this woman because they also have some responsibilities. And the third factor is around the outside of work factors or sociocultural norms and, around gender roles and gender expectation. So the main problem here that we got from the participants is that because the Eastern or Indonesian culture and religious teaching still pretty much emphasis, women's and men's natural role or kodrat, and women's natural role is as mother and homemaker. So whatever they do, they always have to prioritize those roles before anything else. And even though, this is something that I think people are aware that women's gender role is, in the family, then family is central to women's gender role. And work is also important for the double income households, which was also come from the participants. But there's actually a lack of supporting facilities to help women, navigate and sort of juggle this these double burdens so that they can also maintain their productivities. So there's a lack of facility, for example, employer childcare facility support in the office that is affordable and also accessible for them to actually, take care of their children as well. And also, as I mentioned, flexible parental leave. So, well, there is a gender role, but there's also a lack of supporting facility to be able to actually help women to enable them to do those two roles equally. And we already also talked, and in the participants, also we talked to some very unique group of younger age talents. And with this group, we see that there is a sort of a change in the gender roles and in the expectation of gender role, in that the men actually said that they made some efforts and they wanted to share parental responsibility. And that's why they also see that, childcare facilities and also flexible parental leave and policy that are family friendly will be important to support the productivity in the civil service. But to talk more about the solution, I think Roksana will explain that in the next part of the solution. So over to you, Roksana.
Thanks, Hana, very much. What we decided to do with the many comments we had is look at a set of recommendations and policy proposals and I guess policy improvements, particularly in managing the human resource management area of the civil service, to a more family-friendly work policy and practices. And that will tackle the multiple levels of barriers that we came across during the two data collection processes. Next slide, Hana. So the first one, let's look at the structural institutional. These are under the control of all of us. We make these rules so we can change them. So the regulation, as Hana said, I think there is some room to look at the Civil Service Regulation 5/2014 and the Gender Mainstreaming Precedent Instruction 9/2000, and look at how a better gender balance could be ensured in the selection processes for Echelon 1 and 2 in particular. And although we would like merit system to be, of course, upheld, but as we have seen in many of the public service agencies across the world, something does have to change in order for women to come through this process. Another area we have had lots of comments about, as you know, Indonesia is a large country with many islands, and so there is, of course, a rotation, what they call rotasi and mutasi. You could call it work transfer. This is not different from any other civil service. It is also present in Australia. So to attract workers to go to certain remote areas, different things are packaged up so that it is more attractive and takes care of some of the barriers. Like in most countries, not every region is equally developed or the education services are available in an equal way. So of course, if you are in Canberra and you can send your child to ANU, you don't want to move to Charters Towers in Queensland with your teaching job or with whatever it is, or your nursing job. You want to stay in Canberra so your child can go to ANU. So similar considerations exist in Indonesia with the civil servants. What we think could be an improvement is having a better workforce planning. So the agencies could have a really clear sort of planning process where people could put their hands up who are looking for promotions, and promotions usually means a transfer to the region, promote it as a good thing. You are to represent your country as a whole, as we are told as a public servant here in Australia or many countries around the world. We are there to serve the people of that country. And so let's look at, how we can make this a positive experience for people. And that, gaining this insight into working in another region is a positive thing for the next promotion, for example. But also allow certain incentives like education, and this already exists through regulation, but it is not applied equally across agencies. And so there is already education allowance, home trips, remote area allowance, but the application is not consistent. So basically we are asking of a step improvement here. Definitely a big work that Prospera has been doing in 2018 is flexible work, and this became absolutely a critical thing during the pandemic. No one knew that last year when we were advocating this, the public sector to be a lot more flexible. I noticed there was a question around, is working from home making it a bigger burden for women? Absolutely not. Can I just clarify that? Please do not say working from home is making it worse for women. It is better for women. Why? Because they can juggle work and home. What is needed is a framework of working from home. Like we have, we can share this practice in the Australian public service, that you still work your 8 hours or whatever the hour is in that country. So in Indonesia, it's 8 hours. In Australia, it's mostly 7.5 hours, but it is within a bandwidth, so that you perform your 8 hours with some flexibility. And the other issue is, of course, performance management framework. So just because you're working from home doesn't mean you are just not doing anything. And if you're not doing anything, that is not the fault of the person, the staff member. It is the institution and its whole framework that actually is. And as you know, in Australia, we have working from home as a very common feature of work, and productivity is not low. Productivity in the Australian public service is pretty good, I think. Not everyone would agree with me, but I think it is pretty good. There is some international benchmarks, and I think Australia is the third in international measure of a public service in relation to performance. So I think that this whole thing, discussion in the media is not helpful when they say flexible work is just going to make public servants more lazy. This is really not helpful for Indonesia's development into the future. And we know with the pandemic, well, nobody had any choice. This was the only measure we had. We don't have a vaccine. So we do have to look at how we can work productively and have good performance while working from home. I guess Hana already mentioned diversity of age and gender, the flexible career. I know the president has already announced a better cross-agency posting. So not only promotion across your own agency, but across the public service is also a good thing. And I think the president has already, since COVID, raised this issue, which we welcome. Maternity and paternity leave, these are important matters. Indonesia does have very good systems, but the civil service law is not great towards dads. So we are here advocating for male fathers, not just women. And I think that the maternity leave is great. It could have some flexibility, so you don't have to take it full time. You could take it on half pay for a longer period. Fathers could be given some better paternity leave. And some of these examples are already present in, of course, our progressive Ministry of Finance in Indonesia has some really good systems in place that could be adopted for the public service as a whole. So we have looked for solutions, not in the world outside Indonesia, but within Indonesia as much as possible. And I think there are good examples, both in Ministry of Finance, in also DEPLU, the Foreign Affairs Ministry, on fast tracking, on workforce planning, that could be adopted for the civil service as a whole. Next slide. So leadership ecosystem. Okay, so there is a gap. We've mentioned that, and I think that the civil service as a whole has, the echelon 1 positions in particular could have more diversity. It's 18% at the moment. We know that balancing this future in the future public service is really important for diversity and policy making, coming up with better proposals that is, fit for the population as a whole, represents the population as a whole, is important. So we have looked at the current target for Parliament, which is 30% female. So we are kind of suggesting that adopting this 30% as the benchmark of leaders in the echelon 1 and 2, and this could be achieved in the current medium-term national development plan. So we are the mix of proposals we are coming up with, we think could be achieved by 2024. We could have a target of 20%, say, in the next 2 years, and then by 2024, 30%. If the leadership and the public sector put their mind to it, I think this is achievable. Mentoring and coaching, very important. These are soft approaches that really did help in the Australian public service and in other public services. And of course, hours of work and expectation are very important. Some people are working very hard in the Indonesian public service and others are not. Let's have a balance between the two. So everyone works a reasonable amount to get the outcomes that's required of the public service. Next slide. We think that some of the ideas from the literature review that has really helped other public service systems is male champions of change. So if we talk about today, as we know, most of the leadership is male. How can men support a change in the system that actually supports women? So creating a new normal work system, which of course the Administrative Reform Bureau has already been trying to do with COVID-19. We think this can be extended and made the new normal in terms of a better work system that actually looks at the family as well as women and men, that is a better workplace for all. Targeted leadership training linked to performance. So we could look at that as well. And that's been done in certain civil service where leaders have to show that they have actually changed the data. The data is the hard evidence on whether 18% has moved to 20% and 20% has moved to 30% for female leaders. So that is definitely could be quite targeted in terms of performance management. Leadership support to reach that 30% needs a range of things, and I think it can be achieved if we widen it, not just at echelon 1, but echelon 2 as well. Talent management, I think we've spoken enough about it. I think the main point here is let's look at qualification, competence, and performance, not just qualification. So the public sector in Indonesia is very targeted towards, who has the PhD, and that's your reason for becoming an echelon 1. So this might not sit well with ANU, but we are saying that, other public service systems really looked at competence and performance that are not necessarily achieved through formal qualification only. And there are other ways to achieve competence and performance, especially to work in the public service. It's important. So political nous, policy development skills. There are many skills that are very important in the public service. Next slide, Hana. Outside of work, I mean, look, this was, we think that some of it can be addressed by the public service, not all of it. So we put it in here because the participants had a strong emphasis on this. But I think there are lessons from certain ministries. There is also certain policies already in place that could be, again, stepped up. Gender responsive child friendly facility, the regulation on that, the presidential instruction on gender mainstreaming could be more prominent across the various areas of the public service. And I think the employer supported childcare is another one. We are proposing here that sometimes the approach is each ministry looks at providing this for their staff, but maybe in urban areas where women and men are generally both working, perhaps it can be pooled between ministries, and a range of public service, private sector, and university could join together to provide childcare and education, sort of primary education for kids across particular facilities that anyone could access, but public servants might get some kind of a discount, if you like, to be there from their employer. This is, of course, another study that is being pursued by my colleague Bindika in the Jessie team, in the gender team, and further work will be coming in this direction on childcare. And I think it's an area that could be looked at for urban centers. We also heard a number of things that are sociocultural, if you like. I think that the great thing about Indonesia public service that I enjoy as someone who is from another public service is the amount of time and effort put in to really balance listening to everyone. It's a very consensus-led decision-making process, wonderful to see. But I think that this could also look at how some of those might be favoring predisposed ideas around women and the masculine culture. We've heard a number of times from our women participants. But there is a change happening, how to support that change, how to kind of do some unconscious bias training, which, by the way, the Australian Public Service also has done not very far away, quite recently actually. And in fact, there has been certain agencies that have had to specifically target their senior management around unconscious bias because they have not achieved a gender balance at the top. And I won't name those public sector agencies in Australia, but I can tell you that this is not unusual sort of effort by the public sector in many countries, including Australia. So we're proposing a range of soft addresses that could help, in terms of the package to change this data that we have consistently seen over 5 years in the Indonesian public sector. Next.
1 minute, Roksana.
Okay, thank you. Well, we are in the last slide. Look, I think the COVID-19 is, I know it's been a very challenging time, but it's also a blessing in disguise in many areas of policy making. And I think that for the Indonesian public sector, we can really look at developing this flexible work and working hour arrangements, have a framework around it so people do take breaks, they are responsive, and there is a system of work that's different from this going to work and being in office. Last slide, Hana. I would like to just end in also sharing with you that that this process has been very inclusive. As I said, we had the KSN Commissioner, Ibu Shri, join us at the Project Sounding Board, also Australian Treasury, Australian National Audit Office, DFAT, and of course Melissa and Bindika, who are also being supportive. So in terms of the project team, we also had a research methodologist on board to support us in designing the survey and also a qualitative researcher to design the qualitative part. So thank you so much. I look forward to answering some questions. And
thank you so much, Roksana and Hana. Very interesting study and interesting findings. So we have around 30 minutes for question and answers. And for the first round, I'd like to invite 3 questions. So we have already Rose McLeod, Mbak Ninu. I read some questions from the Q&A box, and also a question from Tanya Giacomo. So I'll start with Rose. Are you there, Ross?
Yes, I am.
Okay, go ahead, Pak.
Thanks, Ato. Okay, if I'm just getting one question, let me try to squeeze 2 things into it. Somewhere along the line, you said that we should be aiming for a number of diversity goals or targets. I would have thought the responsibility of people recruiting and promoting people in the civil servants was to find the most competent people for each available position. So I wonder if you could tell me or explain to us why you would prefer to be appointing somebody because of who they are or what they are rather than what they can do. And very much related to that, the question of the issue of gender balance. I think you said that we should be looking to achieve equal outcomes for women. I would dispute that, and I think that we should be looking for equal opportunities for women. So I wonder if you would care to comment on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ross. The second question, I know that indirectly you have addressed this, Roksana, in your presentation, but let me push this further from Mbak Nino Pambudi in Kompas, who asked about what really is the relevance of the COVID-19 now with regards to the women's chances in the public sector. And it seems to her that the burden on women is increasing with the work from home. You said that it's probably not the case because flexible working from home is actually good, but also I think I agree with Mbak Nino that flexible work can also put burden to women, and I know for a fact that some women found in Indonesia, especially those from poor households, find it really hard to work from home because it turns out their working environment in the office is much better than their house, for example. So that challenges are probably need to be addressed. And so that's question from Mbak Nino from Kompas. And let's take the third question from Tanya. Tanya?
Great, thank you so much. And thank you, that was a really fascinating presentation and such a wonderfully designed research project. Thank you for such rich data. I have a question around how the leadership within the civil service is connected to women's political leadership or women's political underrepresentation. There's a bit of evidence globally that there is some connection between the two, primarily because in order to get things done as a politician, it's often very valuable to have connections within the high levels of the civil service. And this is particularly in regions, which then links onto your point about the promotions that are available in regions being less desirable for women. So I wondered if you had any insights or any comments around that particular connection and whether addressing maybe the leadership of underrepresentation of women in the civil service could be a way to also think about some improvement in their political underrepresentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Tanya. So back to you, Roksana or Hana, whoever wants to go first.
All right, I'll start with Ross's couple of questions, though I don't know whether I understood the first part of the question well. So I think it was about whether we are promoting gender equal versus competence and skills. I guess the answer is, of course, we are not promoting just gender. We are actually promoting competence and skills. And of course, the Indonesian public service already has a very competitive process for selecting the graduates, as does many other systems of public sector. I think Indonesia still has the system where it actually has exams to enter the public service for graduates, which used to be the case in Australia as well many years ago. Of course, that's not the case anymore. It's a different system. So I think that the competence is there. I think there is people who are chosen. It's very competitive to enter. You have to sit on a national test. And it is conducted electronically, so there's been really good improvement there, and people all over the country are appointed through this process. So I think, and I think the second part of your question was, rather than gender, promoting gender balance, we should be looking at equal opportunity. Well, the Indonesian public service actually has equal opportunity. The merit system, as we said, it doesn't based on gender, and in some cases I know that the selection panel doesn't even get to see the gender. They just see the skills, qualification, and also adopted in some Australian agencies, so that you could not actually make decisions based on gender, but you were making decisions based on qualification. But as we know, in many things, including many social policy areas, equal opportunity does not mean equity. So I think that equal opportunity has to be tailored with some of the disadvantages that are systemic in the place to actually get the outcomes that we are looking for. So it's not just a coincidence that for tens of whatever number of years women don't come through the system, and that if we just tweak with equal opportunity, we will get the results. So I guess, you know, we can agree to disagree there, but I do think that there are already examples in the public service in other countries where there has been a better gender balance because they have looked at more than just equal opportunity. I guess the other question was related to, I think I saw the question from Ibu Nunik, is it?
Yes, Ibu Nino, yes.
Ninok, yeah. I think that, of course, I'm focusing on public sector. So you are quite right that working from home can be very hard for many women across Indonesia. And of course, we know there are women who work by you know, in the sort of manufacturing industry from home, and you know, this is not a good thing. I agree. I think what we need to do is not kill the baby with the bathwater. So let's not criticize working from home and in that way, but look at what is going to be feasible. So I'm talking about public sector here. Please take that into account. So there are you know, people, of course, in the non-public sector who have poorer households who don't even have a space to work from home, and that's not what we are promoting. But in the public sector, where most of the echelon 4 to 1 have reasonable accommodation and opportunity to work from home, it does provide the balancing between their private responsibilities and their work responsibilities. And I guess what I'm saying, whether it's women or men, let us not judge where work is being performed, but let us judge on the outcomes that are being delivered. So that's all we are asking for. And a system that supports that, a system that's measured on the outcomes and the performance, than the number of hours spent by the desk. And having led many teams in the public sector in Australia, I can assure you that the best people are not always the people who sit at the desk for 9 hours a day. They're often the people who are juggling many things, and they are performing their job in a very good way, even if they are not at work the full number of hours. So I think that I guess that's really to correct that nuance. And I really think that it would be great if we could have some media supporting that working from home is another way of working full-time for the public sector, which does have already good frameworks, but could adopt certain good frameworks that are available and learn from other countries as well. And this is not common. And to be honest with you, we also looked at private sector. And private sector has got many initiatives that are flexible in Indonesia already. So, and they're crying out for some flexibility in the way work is performed. And I guess COVID-19 has turned that on our heads, and we really do have to investigate. We cannot go back to the past. We need to move ahead and learn from COVID-19 around how work can be performed. So that's, I think, and Tanya, thank you very much. A wonderful connection between political leadership and civil service leadership. Look, we didn't look into that in a big way. We did not focus on the links between those two. So you could say that is a area that could be further looked at. And probably there are, as you said, studies which show some correlation between political leadership, which have better balance and therefore better balance in the civil service. New Zealand is a good example that I know of close to my home in Australia. But I think that you're right that there is probably a link, and it should be explored. And I think that perhaps it's, you know, it's a chicken and egg thing. I don't know which one influences the other, but I think that let's start somewhere. So if we start in the public service, maybe that will, you know, create. But we have some great political leadership in Indonesia from women leaders in the political system. So I think that it's about, let's have more of it, not a limited number. Hope that answers some of those questions, Pak Arianto.
Thank you. But if you can, I can read a follow-up comment from Ross there in the Q&A box. He asked
Okay, sure.
if there is genuine equality of opportunity for promotion, how can the outcome possibly be described as inequitable?
Well, that's the problem. I don't think there is a perfect equal opportunity anywhere. So I think that's, you know, I think that's we haven't reached that perfection, Ross. If we could, that would be great. I would probably be somewhere else too, but it's not perfect. And of course, it uses judgment in selection processes and so on. So it's not a quantitative process totally, and nor should it be. So I think that I think there's enough evidence to show in the public sector overall that there are other ways that ensures you know, some of those opportunities and you know, ways of managing the selection process. For example, if you know, I'm not sure whether you're aware, but in Australia, you know, most selection panels would be at least have men and women. If it's an indigenous selection, we would have someone from that community, or a non-English speaking selection, or a person with disability. So there are many things that we could, soft approaches that actually increases diversity.
Okay, thank you. Hana, you have something to add, or shall we get another round of questions?
No, we can go on to the next.
Okay, so the next round I have on my list are Kanti Pertiwi, Nurina Merdikawati, and Gita Nasution. So Kanti, you go first.
Okay, thank you very much, Pak Arianto. My name is Kanti from Universitas Indonesia. Thank you for the very interesting presentation. My background is in management studies. I looked at corruption and business government relations in Indonesia. So I'm very interested when you talked about systemic intervention. I've been involved with this community of bureaucrats in Indonesia. They have a group called the Writing Bureaucrats, if you want to have a look. It's very interesting what they do there. And I think one of the things that came up in our discussions in that group was the idea that the current new public management model that is being sort of applied through the bureaucratic reform, it's very much influential, I think, in women's career progression. And they talked about how the performance-based regime is very restrictive and how they undervalue women's skills and talents. So, for example, one of my colleagues there, she asked, she's really into this organizing meetings and discussions about various topics, but her superiors or in the office will never appreciate her skills and talents in that department. So it's very much it's very restrictive. And then the idea that public organizations are now run like private corporations, I think it's also another source of problem. So I'm just wondering if you also look at that to think about what sort of systemic intervention that's probably needed. And I think the other thing is about socioeconomic inequality, which also very much related to the remuneration that is not yet equally delivered. So Ministry of Finance, for example, enjoyed at least 3 times more than others in the same position in other government department or ministries. And this tend to normalize the gap in remuneration. And I think this probably contributes to how people are performing in general, and probably the female workers in more particular. So it's important, I think, to look at this context of inequality, because some families or some women may have better support as well because they earn more, so they can pay live-in maids and all that. And probably if their husbands also work in certain ministries that are considered basah, basah ministries, or they earn more than others. So I think it's very important to look at individual situation as well, the lack of infrastructure between families. And I also talked about in one of the research that I do, how female civil servants, they talked about how they have to manage the school from home, right? School from home, and they don't have the gadgets, so they have to share mobile phones with their children while doing all the tasks or whatever assignments they get from the office.
Okay.
So yeah, those are the
Okay.
things that I think about. Yeah,
Thank you, Kanti. Dika?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Congratulations to Roksana and team for their research. And I think I have 3 quick questions. I mean, the first one regarding the merit system, is it like a system whereby one has to nominate themselves in order to apply for a certain position? If that's the case, then there can be a problem whereby women would think that they're not yet qualified for certain positions. So if there is no mentoring system that really encourage women to apply for certain promotion opportunities, then I don't think the merit system can really help to boost the number of female leaders in the ministries. And then the second point is that I think in terms of the flexible arrangement, to what extent in your recommendation or something that the ministries have already implemented to really account for those women who decided to leave the workforce for a while, for like a year, because they think that they want to focus on taking care of their children and then they will be welcome when they're back. So it's more like not only having paid maternity leave in place, but the flexibility when they're ready to return to work again. Mm-hmm. And then the third question is that I think in one of your slides, there's one ministry that performs well in terms of getting that 30% mark in terms of the female leaders. And what did that ministry do that they can really have that achieve that 30% representation and things that can be learned from the other ministries? Thank you.
Thank you, Dika. Those were quite many questions. So I hope Gita wouldn't mind to go to the next round. So let's go to Roksana or Hana to respond to these questions first, and then we go to third round.
So I guess maybe I'll start again. Sorry, Hana. I think that just responding to Ibu Kanti, great questions and observations. I guess a couple of things. Of course, we did not do everything in this. We looked at just the women's career progression and some of those barriers leading in those 3 framework questions. You raised the salary differences between agency. Of course, this is an issue, but can I also say that this is not uncommon? In Australia, if you work for the Australian Treasury or DFAT, you're paid more than if for like me who worked for the Australian Bureau of Statistics before, you get paid less. So, but of course, the salary difference is not as much within. There is a system where there is, the gap is not huge, but there is a significant difference between recognition of ministries, their work, and if you can say in Asia already you have ministry levels like level 1, level 2, level 3. In some ways, we also have that system in the Australian public service. If you work in defense, treasury, finance, your salary is a bit better than if you work in ombudsman or ABS or, So that's, I think, something we can't really criticize. I think that's not uncommon, but I think the gap is a bit too much, and there needs to be some recognition of that, the gap. In terms of, I'm not sure whether it was Ibu Kanti who also raised around infrastructure. And of course, look, COVID-19 has shown all of that. I mean, nobody was prepared to work from home. Even actually in Australia, some agencies were much better equipped than others. So of course, this is things that will be looked at. And as you know, that the Indonesian government announced, a significant boost to look at the digital government and digital infrastructure. So that's great. I think the response has been very, very appropriate to some of these things that have been lacking. And yes, of course, working from home in terms of that this also happened in Australia, where women are also having kids working in school from home and not having enough equipment. So that's a particular challenge with the COVID-19 situation, where schools were also being done from home. It's not usual. So again, I would say that we shouldn't mix up that issue with working from home either. So in the normal situation of working from home, of course, your kids would be in school, and probably you can do a few different things to manage yourself, including picking up your children from school. So I think these issues are, are many. We did not look at everything in this study. Just on to the next, the merit system. Look, the merit system is actually very good. So it's not based on self-appointment, for sure. It's quite rigorous. So it has supervisory recommendation. It has testing. It has, performance. It has, some of them even have 365. So peers, how the peers think, what kind of a supervisor you are, and how you collaborate. So it's improved quite a lot in the last 5 or 6 years, but there is still room to go, and it's inconsistent. Some agencies are doing better than others. So I guess, a kind of, maybe it's not a recommendation, but one of the themes you could probably hear in our study is that we're trying to say, let's learn from each other a bit more and take the best practices between agencies as well within Indonesia. And not only looking at overseas, but within Indonesia. So I think the merit system, I would say, is pretty good. It has the right rubrics, if you like, but we are saying let's tweak it with, for example, already in the system for Echelon 1 promotions, which is approved by the President. The Merit Protection Agency, KAESAN, actually reviews the selection process from the agency to make sure it has followed the correct selection process. One thing that we are suggesting is that maybe they could say in 1 year, there might be, of course, like 10 Echelon 1 selection processes going on between various levels of the Indonesian public service. Maybe they could look at, is the 3 nominees that are being proposed to the President to choose one, are they all male every time? Is out of the 3, one of them a female? Maybe not from that agency, but from another agency. So what we are saying is that there are some patterns that are coming up that may be better to look at some dynamics that could, shift this change. So I think, and I can't remember the last part of your question, Nina, it was Nina, but Hana, do you want to add a few things now?
Yeah, sure. So maybe just to emphasize again that I think the civil service has sort of like the right regulations in place already. So the merit system is already provided a good, as Roksana said, rubrics of, equal opportunities, and also how they evaluate talents. And also there's, other regulation from other ministries about ensuring there's gender responsive facility in the workplace, for example, and, so many other good example. But the problem is, I think it's more on the implementation in the practice. So how we make sure that, there's a supporting environment that actually can, ensure there's equitable outcome. Because of course, as you mentioned also, I think, but Nurina or someone from the question, women are offered selection, women are offered for promotion, but they self-select out because of, the lack of, supporting facility that might, help them to, juggle this quote unquote double burden that they have with the childcare. So really it's about getting that, supporting elements for the system to ensure that there's equitable outcome for both women and men.
Thank you, Hana. So next is Gita, followed by Nia Sarinastiti. So Gita Nasution, are you on?
Yeah,
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thanks, Pak. Congratulations, Roksana and team, for this research. I really enjoyed the presentation. I just have some questions to clarify and probably probe more information from you. The first one is about the the women in the echelon. I just wonder if in your FGD you found differences between echelon 1 and 2, who are the leadership group, and the echelon 3 and 4, who are the aspired group, especially on the issue about the gendered role at home, about their childcare responsibilities, about the working hours, because probably they have been in the lower echelon before, and how did they deal with that, and how do they actually compare their experience with their peers or their colleagues now who are in the echelon 3 and 4. And the second one is on the percentage of women's leadership in other ministries outside Prospera partners. I wonder if you have some data on that from this research, just to compare and then see if there's any difference that the female ministers make, contribution to these differences. And yeah, thirdly, on your recommendation, I wonder if having CCB or CCR in Indonesia is feasible, and do you think it will be another burden for the government to do so? Yeah, that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Gita. Nia, you're next.
Hey, thank you very much. This is just bringing an issue which we had during this pandemic time, where we had to work with several clients within the government, and there were concerns with the projects that, basically they're working way over time because it encroached into the weekends too. So they didn't bring it up to their supervisor with fear that they are considered not productive because they're at home not working. So I was wondering whether this has been discussed post the research results, and it came something as an additional input to the research. Thank you.
Thank you. So over to you, Roksana, Hana.
Thank you. Hana, do you want to answer Gita's question?
Yeah, sure. So of course, on the first questions about differences between the answers or perceptions of women in echelon 1 and 2 and echelon 3 and 4, there is some differences because obviously the women in echelon 1 and 2 have, managed to somehow break the glass ceiling and be in that position. But interestingly, I think, there's more optimistic view from the leadership cohort, the echelon 1 and 2, about the new recruit, the new generation of civil servants who they felt are more, also have high competence and have high qualification. And they feel that these new recruits will actually bring sort of like a new, fresh perspective and the way work is doing in the civil service. So they were actually looking forward to that. And some of them actually have an open mind to push this agenda forward, and some of them already do their own informal mentoring and coaching for their staff. But the problem is it's pretty much still an informal sort of process from their own initiative. So it's not something that's encouraged systematically throughout the civil service. So really it depends on the leader itself. And that's why we put leadership ecosystem as one of the barriers, but also part of the solutions. And on the percentage of women's leaders outside Prospera partners, we don't actually look at that because, we can't look at everything. So we try to focus on this. But as you can see from the national data, it's quite telling that the average is less than 20%. And I think most of the ministry that have high women leadership in their echelon 1 and 2 is ministries that, normally are in the softer side of issues, like such as the Ministry of Health and Ministry of Women's Empowerment and so on. So really it's still also, there's also a problem with this structural divide, but we haven't looked at that in this studies, so we can't really say for sure about these issues. But I think that in general, we can say some of the Prospera partners have done well in managing, getting women into the leadership positions. And I think that the idea of this study also is to bring out these good examples and share it with other government agencies so that they can also learn from it and hopefully actually implement it in practice. And yeah, I think on Mbak Nia's questions about working from home, Yes, we also do have that complaints in the FGDs that, you know, their supervisors are not really, you know, evaluating from the outcomes, but more on whether or not they present at work, they're present in Zoom meetings, for example, when they are called. So really, it's one of the problem, the expectation and the work cultures of, you know, evaluating performance. But I think that we also cover that in the recommendation that we want this to change so that, you know, leaders also have the sensitivity around that people might have other responsibility at home, so that, you know, work is also about producing outcome, not just, you know, attending meetings or being in the office. And Roksana, maybe you want to add more things from that.
No, I think you have covered hopefully sufficiently. Maybe I will answer Nia's question, which is a really good one. And I think it's not common, your question, just to the public service, but in work culture as a whole. So of course there are perceptions in every work culture, whether, you know, you're working in a university or a public sector or private sector, you know, how your boss views you. So I guess, so it's not uncommon in where we have heard that, you know, the sort of the extra hours of work, you know, outside after hours, weekend work, you know, that you can provide is sort of seen as kind of, you know, you're high performing because you are willing to work these extra hours. So this is not uncommon, but of course it does create a notion where someone who is not able to give that weekend hour or that after hour as not the performer. So I think that these are kind of, you know, built-in unfairness in the workplace generally, and it very much depends on your boss, who is maybe more understanding of, you know, if you have caring responsibility, that maybe you could not do that extra bit now, but you could do it once you have, you know, passed this point, and someone else in the team could take it. So I guess, you know, team approach to gaining those outcomes are important. But you're right that this does affect women negatively. And we did hear even from women respondents who said, I'd rather have men echelon force in my team because I have so much work to do and I know that that person can stay beyond 6 p.m. whereas the women has to leave at 4:30 to tend to the work at home. So it does affect disproportionately sometimes to the perceptions, if you like, and they're not easy to solve in any workplace.
Acho, you're still mute, I think.
Sorry. Yeah, I was saying that our time is up now. So let me thank Roksana and Hana for wonderful discussion. Also, all the participants. And then now I will turn this back to Nuke to tell us what's coming next week and close the session.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pak Arianto and ANU team.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you, everyone who has attended today. Next week, we have two very interesting seminars. The first one is the Sadli and Mobiarto public lecture. It's about industrial policies to escape the middle income trap in Indonesia. This is by Justin Lin from Peking University. Justin is the he was the senior vice president and chief economist of the World Bank. And also in the next global seminar, the same time next week, we will have, the topic is the PSBB and COVID-19 in Jakarta and Yogyakarta. Dr. Suharti Sutar from the government of DKI Jakarta and Professor Budi Resa Sudarmo from ANU will be speaking. So we look forward to see you next week. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'm going to close this now.
Thank you.